and welcome to Beyond Focus TV. My name is Angie Daniel and I am the hostess. For tonight's show, we have with us Ms. Yvette Clarke. She is the Congresswoman for the 11th District. We are going to talk about different aspects of what she stands for and what she believes in that I think the community needs to hear about. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'll introduce her to you. We'll be right Welcome back. Before we took a break, I did tell you I was going to introduce to you Ms. Yvette Clarke. She is the Congresswoman for the 11th District. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Angie.
You are so welcome. Usually every show that we will start with a brief description of yourself. I'm sure the community knows who you are, but just tonight, give them a little brief idea of who
Certainly.
you are.
I have been the representative of the 11th Congressional District for the past 5.5 years now. And prior to being elected to the House of Representatives was a New York City Council member within the same district. My council district was wholly contained in the 11th Congressional District. So many people were aware of me and the work that I've been doing on their behalf. So that in total is about 11 years in public office. But even prior to that, I actually succeeded my mother in the New York City Council. So Clarke has been representing this part of Brooklyn for quite some time, 20 years now. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I'm very aware of your work and your mom's work. When I first came to America, I mean, the idea of a woman running office.
I know.
It was, it was something to see and to live by. I thought, I was really.
And a foreign-born woman, too.
Yes.
The first foreign-born woman to be elected to the city council was Dr. Clarke.
For me, it was just like a matter of this is a path you can take on. I'm very passionate about politics and certain things that affect my everyday life.
I'm passionate more about service, and I see politics as a means to an end.
Yes.
And I was fortunate to be raised in a home and family that saw service as a calling. So that my mother, throughout my entire life, has been trying to help people with information, with inspiration, with motivation, and by elevating their concerns to electoral office, it gave me an example of which I've been proud and just excited, quite frankly.
I mean, it is very exciting because one of the things that we don't do on a regular basis, because coming from the islands, understanding that a woman's position.
Yes.
Right? So to come to New York and see how she took it upon herself to make that much of a difference. And I've always thought so highly of her.
And she's in the tradition of a lot of women historically who have seen the value of families and communities and felt the need to direct policy to help their lives.
Yes.
That's the ultimate calling, I believe, of service, is when you try to make someone else's life better. And from that, you derive a certain amount of benefit yourself, a certain amount of satisfaction that you've done what's in the best interest of not only your family, but the community you live in.
And to see that, just transitionally, that she's implanted all of that within you, and now who's taking it upon yourself to help the community do better.
Yeah.
So in terms of doing better, there are 3 things that I would love for the community to talk to, to hear your voice on, because I think there's so much that that's on your firm in terms of your issues. But these 3 I would love to talk about. 1 is Homeland Security.
Yes.
2 is healthcare reform. And the 3rd is the labor force. I am hoping to at least touch base on all 3.
Sure.
What I would want the community to understand is what is Homeland Security and how did you get involved with it in terms of New York's position?
Okay. Well, it was a natural outgrowth of a position that I actually held on the New York City Council. And I was fortunate right after 9/11, I was elected to the New York City Council. It was a very tough time for our nation and for our city, of course. Um, but after being elected, was assigned in the City Council the Committee on Fire and Criminal Justice Services. So the whole issue of rebuilding the FDNY was something from a policy perspective that I had to work very closely with the administration on. And as a result of that, almost became sort of an expert on first responders and the work that they do. And so when I was elected to the House of Representatives, I noticed that there wasn't anyone from the city of New York who served on that committee. So in terms of offering myself, it was very natural. Someone who had experienced 9/11, which is why the agency was established to begin with. It was in response to 9/11, and having had the experience of understanding sort of the bureaucratic outgrowth and aspect of having worked with the FDNY was sort of a natural outgrowth, I think, of having had that experience in the city council.
Another thing I wanted to know, how do you feel like personally your effect within the FDNY aspect of helping the Homeland Security, getting people to understand, like, besides 9/11, there are so many other things that are happening.
That's right. And, that opens your eyes to understanding disaster, period. And disaster comes in many different forms. We're seeing on a national level things like raging fires in certain communities, the flooding. We all saw what happened in New Orleans after a hurricane. You become much more conscious of what it takes to help people to be resilient because things are going to happen.
It's funny that you've mentioned New Orleans. And one of the things that I remembered that we've talked about in New York, especially in Brooklyn, within church members, is that how some people felt like, you know what, it didn't happen to me. It's just the same thing with the Haiti.
Right.
Unless you see it like vividly, unless you are taking it consciously, you want to be able to say, okay, this is happening around where I live, or this is happening to people that I know, and I want to make a difference within the community. Another situation that I would love to get your opinion on, I know it's gun control. We've just had this massive massacre in Colorado. What's your opinion on how do you think we as a people can urge the government to control?
Well, we have to get fed up enough that we organize. I mean, I think as a New Yorker, as a Brooklynite, as someone who has gone through traumatic, really violent experiences myself, there's no doubt in my mind that we have to come to a collective consciousness of those who have been traumatized by violence and say enough is enough. We've got to be able to elevate our humanity enough to say, you know what, we need to put some stipulations in place so that we can create the safest environment that we possibly can. Nothing is foolproof. Nothing is 100%. The mind can't conceive of the numerous ways in which human beings can harm and hurt one another. But we can, after each incident, look at ways to narrow down the means by which people go about creating such destruction.
Okay. I mean, I wanted to pinpoint the idea of how it's the most ridiculous thing. Like, for example, with New York, we will come back to the stop and frisk idea. Right? But a gentleman can walk into a movie theater. That doesn't mean that if someone tried to stop him, I'm not saying like he could have been stopped, because we don't know.
We don't know.
He has a full mask on. His hair is red. Nobody saw that as an alarm situation. I mean, there's so many different aspects. Well, I think we can't control the human mind, but we can control what they carry on with them.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of discussion today about mental health.
Yes.
And one of the things that we don't address well as a civil society is what happens when someone is traumatized or someone is exhibiting a change in character that cannot be attributed to any particular experience, but may be a chemical manifestation of something that is Right.
I'm so glad you just mentioned that. We're going to take a short break because we have to take a break just to break in between of the taping.
Sure.
We're going to come back and talk about the idea of mental health and how it affects us on a regular basis. We will take a short break. We'll be right Welcome back. We are here with Ms. Yvette Clarke. She is the Congresswoman for the 11th District. We are having a great conversation on how we can protect our people, protect our community, protect our kids. And part of what we were talking about is how a young person had the choice, or we're not sure as to what happened, for him to go into a theater and just created this madness.
Yeah.
But my opinion of it is that if we had a gun control, if we had a system that would control the amount of, I mean, think about it. One of the things that they talk about is that he was able to buy 6,000 worth of ammunition online. And so, you know, the whole controlling of what we are able to do, I think could be controlled by, you know, a whole lot more.
Yeah, I think they're just some common sense measures that after all of these incidents, incidents involving automatic weapons that have caused mass casualties, it's really time that we examine what we can do. We, you know, at the national level, I have an opportunity to hear the debate regularly, and there are parts of this country where there is a culture that
You
hunts,
have the right to.
but that hunts. I mean, it's their environment, it's their culture. However, there's a certain level of responsibility that gets
Yes.
applied to that.
Yeah.
And the question is, what are the parameters? And I think that we have crossed a long time ago in urban environments. We've crossed that boundary, understanding that when guns don't have to go through registration, when a gun owner doesn't have to register a massive quantity of handguns purchased, and then, you know, they're dumped into a car and shipped across the country into environments where you have densely populated environments, where, you know, people are in very high pressured environments, where their environments may be environments of deprivation.
Yes.
So survival day to day could mean a short fuse, could mean just an environment of high risk.
But Ms. Clarke, wouldn't you say that, I think too, even with that extent, right? We as the people, I understand we all have human rights. We all have the right to do whatever we so choose to, but shouldn't it be limited? Shouldn't there be a way that we would say, okay, I understand that you need to hunt, but you don't need 10 guns in your house?
Well, you know, that's where the debate begins to depart. I think that it's responsible gun ownership.
Yes.
Responsible gun ownership. That means the people who manufacture them, the people who sell them, the people who display them at gun shows, and the law-abiding gun owner has an obligation or responsibility to the rest of the nation to say, you know, these are the limitations. These are what we recognize as that unintended or adverse consequences of having such lax regulation around gun possession in the United States of America. And until we really have that conversation, we're going to continue to be traumatized by every one of these incidents that take place, because something in our being is saying to us,
this is not normal.
This is not normal. Not only is this not normal, but as a human being, there's got to be a way to prevent it. It's a natural inclination. Because if you throw up your hands and say, there's no way we can prevent this from happening, then what you're saying is you're allowing for space for anarchy.
anyone to do whatever they so choose to.
Exactly.
Talking
If they're
about that.
crafty enough,
Yes.
if they're diabolical enough, if they're, there are a number of
You'd have
reasons
to
why people would,
Your
come
mind had to
up
go.
with, the types of scenarios that we've seen with these mass shootings.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about, aspect of controlling, I know you are extremely passionate about cyberspacing, of how we can secure our cyber web. I'm really interested in that.
Yeah.
What's your intake on it?
It's kind of policy wonkish because the average American is not really conscious of the utility of the internet, other than the space that they occupy on it. And oftentimes people have a relationship with the screen before them, and they're not concerned about
The rest of
the nuts and bolts of what makes it happen, what makes it fluid, what makes it international. And as a result of that, you, without the proper cyber hygiene, can become unwittingly a tool of individuals, nation states, all kinds of nefarious individuals.
Let me ask you a quick
organizations.
question. What is a proper hygiene within cyber world?
Well, I mean, there's so many ways that we can protect ourselves. First of all, these instruments are not built like television sets where you hold them for years on end. They're upgraded regularly. And when you don't upgrade, you have the most failed level of security, because that particular product has been on the market long enough for individuals to know how to manipulate. Exactly. So upgrading of the instrument is very important. They call it cyber hygiene. So when you get that signal from McAfee or all the other safety programs that are out there to upgrade your instrument, your computer, your laptop, your tablet, your phone, upgrade it. Upgrade it. And that's the best that we can ask of the layperson. One of the things that I've often stated in my committee, because I serve on the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Protection Subcommittee, I'm the ranking member for the Democratic Party on that committee, is that we are not good at educating the public. There should be a really great public service campaign established to make people aware. With the proliferation of all of these tools, from cell phones to desktop computers, it's really important for people to know how to manage, even at a basic level.
Yes, and what information to put on that, because regardless of anything, I've told my daughter, one of the things that I've mentioned to her before we took a break, we're going to take a break. Before we take the break, I just wanted to make that point, is that the smallest information that you put in there, I mean, you could download my whole profile, and it's kind of scary because there's no limitation, and where do you go, and how do you ask the government to limit what information is available to the rest of the public, what's available to the government, you understand? It's like everything is out there.
That's right.
So how do you protect yourself from that?
Well, I think that we have to begin to define the use of that tool, because there are parameters for each individual about what is for public consumption and what is private.
Personal.
We know that this tool is capable of tracking our behavior, so that we're going to be looking at, for instance, the computer practice of the young man who killed all of those people, and that will reveal something to us about him and who he is and what he's about.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back and continue with our healthcare reform. I can't wait for us to talk about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are here with Miss Yvette Clarke. She is the Congresswoman for the 11th District. Before we took a break, we were talking about the cyberspace and what it entails, and when is too much is given in terms of information to the public, and when you can create the impact, like creating the two people, the personhood and the cyberspace person. Just to kind of close it and out, like we need to understand how to create the governmental idea of a person within that aspect of it, and when it's alarming,
Right.
to know I need to let somebody else know this is what I'm reading about this person, because a younger generation really, they have two different personalities, one for the cyberspace and one for at home and regular basis. So we need to be aware of that. I think is one aspect of creating and protecting ourselves.
And I think that that is going to evolve as part of how we manage as a civil society. It may be individuals will go into that course of study because there's a whole world of study around internet behavior, how one interfaces with it, and, the human aspect and application with regards to the use of the tool, right? So I just think that over time, some of this almost becomes nullified because there's a recognition by the greater society that there are distinctly different personal attributes that can't be portrayed through the use of the internet.
Yes.
And on the other hand,
And
there's some indicators when you look at some individuals' use of it of what makes them tick.
And you can read it. You
Yeah.
can read it. I mean, I think in terms of profiling, like if you go into someone's profile on Facebook on a regular day-to-day basis, you can see where their minds are at.
Yeah.
You can tell when somebody is like irritated at all time.
Right.
What irritates, no, seriously, what irritates them
Right.
on a regular basis. So all of these things are ways for us to kind of control, or at least be aware of the society that you live in, the people that are around you.
That's
and
right.
your friends, and maybe the person probably needs somebody to talk to, and that's why they.
And that's why I believe that there will be future occupations that emanate from this understanding of what's displayed in people's personalities as they use the internet.
I like that. Good idea.
Yeah.
To continue our conversation now, second thing I wanted to talk about, I'm not sure if we're going to have time to talk about the third one, but the second one is the healthcare reform that personally I'm really, really, really extremely passionate about, because I think a lot of, on your website, it says 47 million people are not insured. But to my belief, that there's more than 47 million people that are not insured, and then people have no jobs. There's so many other ways that it's affecting their health system and itself. What is your intake of the healthcare reform, and where do you think we can go with
I think it can be transformative to our civil society. With all of our dreams, our aspirations as Americans, with all of the true grit that we have, without a healthy population, things that we could do expeditiously become a source of challenge for us, because our health care system has discriminated for so long against human beings in a myriad of ways. I mean, the bill is lengthy in terms of how it tries to address these disparities.
Yeah, and what's available to the common person.
Exactly. And the fact that we were paying for people's poor health outcomes, which is the most expensive form of providing health care to people, because it's when, you have to have
emergency.
every single service available to you just to help. We're inclined to help people to survive and to live as comfortable a life as they can given their circumstances. But we're talking about flipping all of that.
Okay.
Prevention.
Yes.
How do we get human beings in a habit of
taking care of themselves?
taking care of themselves?
Yeah. I always believe in the pros and cons. So the healthcare reform, when reading it, it says that it's for patient centered, right? I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who happens to be a doctor, and he's saying, like, this is nonsense. It's patient-centered. What about us? What about my time that I've studied? Where do I make my money? What about the healthcare system? How do we get paid? And for a doctor to feel like, okay, I've put in so much work. What am I getting out of it?
Right.
You know, and seeing it from that point of view, what do you think that we can do in terms of getting them to understand? It's not like you will get paid, but how, based on what is it going to be based on?
Well, the whole idea of bringing so many Americans into a system of care provides more opportunity for doctors to apply their trade.
Okay.
Right? It brings down the cost of excesses in the system and leaves more room for innovation and for doctoral care in ways that we can't imagine now because of the tightly closed system that basically made things as finite as possible. You were locked into, you know, it's going to cost this much for an exam. It's going to, you know, and so there was no way for doctors, as care became more costly, to gain ground, particularly when you had such a management from the insurance companies that determines so much of it.
Yeah. I mean, we have a difference, for example, like we have different aspects of the health insurance, right? And then different health insurance covers different things, as we know.
Right.
And it gives you different opportunities for you to be able to go to different hospitals.
That's right.
So with the new healthcare reform, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone is equal.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say everyone is equal. What I would say is everyone has access to a quality health insurance plan. So remember, this is all based on insurance. And what was happening is that we had a huge pool, tens of millions of people who were uninsured. Because most people are insured through their employers. Or they're under the Medicare system, which has a menu of options.
I mean, there's so many things. I would love for you and I to sit down and talk about the whole Medicaid, Medicare system.
Yes.
And who
vet care,
oh,
you know,
God,
you have
so many things.
That's right. TRICARE.
The community, they don't know about. They don't know that it's there, and they're not taking advantage of it.
Right.
I mean, I wish we could educate, like you just said earlier, the community from one aspect of anything to where we need to for them to understand what the healthcare system.
What it is with health insurance is that most people don't use their health care insurance until they absolutely have to use it. And that's when they find out the limitations on their policies. You know, and of course, if they're uninsured, they know the moment they walk into an emergency room that
that's all they have.
That's all they have.
You know, I understand. I'm being signaled that this is the end of our show.
Oh.
I would love for you and I to because I have a third point that I would love to talk to you about. We can create, like, I mean, the conversation, because I think the community really needs to understand what the labor force have to offer. But since this is the end of our show, I'm offering you, for the public community, for us to continue having this conversation.
I would look forward to that, Angie. I think this is a great service that you're providing to the community. And, you know, I don't have the opportunity to have as many of these conversations as I'd like. I'm always in Washington, and I think this is a great way to bring to people's consciousness, you know, the level of policy decision making that's taking place at the federal level and how it impacts on their lives. And, you know, where I see my role in representing them as landing on many of these issues, because I think that that is important. I take the full faith and confidence of the voters with me to Washington. And even for those who could not vote, don't vote, what can we do to make things better for them and their families?
And I would say, too, it gives them an opportunity to get to know you on a different level. You know, to see you as the person. I mean, not just an idea, like to listen to your opinions and relate and have something to look forward to.
Fabulous.
So this is the end of our show. Is there any last words you would like to say to the community?
Well, I think the last thing that I'd like to share with the community is that, you know, a lot of what I do relies on their active engagement in the process. And if there's something that we've discussed today they'd like to know further information about, they should certainly feel free to reach out to my office. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. So I'm really trying to find avenues to connect with my constituents and with people of goodwill who really want to make a difference in our civil society. I think this is a time of activism in a way in which maybe this generation has not known because the civil rights movement preceded us. But without us being engaged, without us collectively using our voices, it muffles, you know, what I'm trying to say on their behalf. You all are basically my megaphone, my amplifier. And so I hope that more people will engage and will begin having these conversations.
Okay, great. You are the voice for the people, and I really thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your opinion with me.
Thank you.
This is the end of our show. We will see you next Tuesday, same place, same time. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. This was good.
It was good. Thank you.